Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we're going to talk about why you really can't trust most of the things you see reported in the corporate media, and I would even say in the alternative media, the independent media, much of which is filled with disinfo, misinfo, and likely being pushed by intelligence agencies. But before we do that, I'd like to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com. I've been producing videos and content on this website since 2012. I officially launched the network as a collective network where anybody, including you, who has something to say can contribute videos, vlogs, essays, interviews, etc., as long as it's in line with our message of trying to wake people up and spread spiritual empowerment as well as empowerment and solutions for the corruption that we see in both the government and the political world. And if you fit with that message, then you probably will be at home here. I'd like to remind you guys to follow us on Minds, follow us on Steemit, join our Discord channel, sign up for our text list. I cannot emphasize this enough. Follow us on BitChute, and if you want to support via Patreon or Subscribestar there, the links join our email newsletter as well. So I found this article. Poll finds Americans struggle telling real news from fake. In a time of ever-widening political divides, most Americans also struggle to determine whether the news they read every day is accurate, according to a poll by the Associated Press released on Thursday. But people's news selections and their level of trust in sources in those reports also fall sharply along political party lines, and this is a huge problem we'll talk about in a moment. According to the poll by the AP, the NORC Center for Public Affairs Research, and USA Facts, the poll found that 47% of Americans, regardless of their political belief, come across news reports that they cannot immediately be verified as accurate. Another says that 31% have no problem verifying accuracy. Now, I just want to say something on that one point. So as a journalist and as an activist who has been dissecting news for a decade now and writing articles and making documentaries and books and all this stuff and been very active on social media, there's been more than a dozen times or so over the years when people have come to me and say, hey, they'll send me a private message or an email and say, hey, can you tell me if this video or this article is real or fake? And these are people who, they're supporters of mine, they're genuine people, and at least they're somewhat skeptical and they don't want to just go around sharing something that might not be real, so they reach out to me. And I kid you not, in a matter of a minute or two, I can look it up very quickly and easily and say, hey, sorry, buddy, but looks to be bullshit. Or, hey, look, this seems to be pretty legitimate. Here's the source I found. And so I've realized, and I've done a few videos on this channel. You can look back. I think it's called How to Do Research or something like that. Something along those lines. I've done a couple of videos like that, sort of showing my process of trying to confirm information, and I did that with the Finders videos as well during my investigations. So my point is that I guess it's a skill that I thought most people had in their toolbox, essentially just critical thinking, but I guess there's a little bit more to it, right? And I've realized more and more over time how less people, there's not a lot of people who do have that skill, or if they do have that skill, the internet is making it more and more difficult because, as we're going to talk about in a moment, there's video and audio fakery now, where we can't even tell if the audio from somebody is legitimate or if the video's legitimate, and it's going to become more and more difficult over time. This is only going to just get harder and harder, and it seems like this this is being done by design, I would say. So we have this poll kind of confirming that people are being divided by political belief, where the left-leaning people, they believe CNN and MSNBC and Rachel Maddow and this and that, and the right wing laughs at them and like, oh my God, they're so full of shit. How can they believe that lady? And they're right. They're right about that the MSN and CNN are all bullshit. But then those same people on the right will turn to something like Fox News or Breitbart or some other super right-wing conservative thing and just swallow up any bullshit that they pour down their throat into their mind. And then the left is like, oh my God, I can't believe they follow those conservative news websites. And there's some sites that are pretty blatant with their, where they stand. They don't even try to act like they're not partisan or like they're objective. This would be on the left, Slate.com and the Alternet, which Raw Story have. I check all these websites just because I want to know what different people are talking about. But I mean, just the obvious bias has become so blatant. And the same thing for the right. So sidebar here, for those who are kind of pushing back a little bit on me being critical of Donald Trump, or of saying, oh, it's not the right wing, it's only the left wing. Look, guys, I don't know how long you've been quote unquote awake or been going down these rabbit holes, but if you still think that this is all about the left versus the right, you're not awake. I'm sorry. I'm just going to be as blunt and real and compassionate as possible and say that if you still think that your level of awakeness has gotten you to the point where you've realized, hey, every bad person is on the left side of the spectrum and they're all Democrats and they're all, liberals, you're not awake, my friend. I'm sorry. And I want you to go back to square one, figure out where you took a wrong turn. Did you start watching too much Alex Jones, or did you listen to too much, Stefan Molyneux or Mike Cernovich, or just Donald Trump in general? I don't know. And I'll say that to the other side. If you're on the left side of things and you think, oh, it's all the right wing and the Republicans, my friends, again, you're not awake. Stop listening to MSNBC. Stop reading only Raw Story and only Alternate, because the truth is, all these outlets, they have their biases. And sometimes they are factual with the information they're presenting. But they also like to couch this in terms of, it's always the Republicans that are in the wrong. It's always the Democrats that are in the wrong. And that's the bullshit. So, like I said, 47% of Americans, regardless of political belief, nearly half of people cannot immediately come across news that they say cannot be verified as accurate. Another 31% say they have no problem verifying accuracy. So only a third of the nation, or as represented by this poll, can verify the accuracy of the reporting they come across. Nearly 2/3 of Americans polled see news reports that are one-sided or fail to present information in a contextualized and balanced way, and that is becoming increasingly true. Now, this was kind of interesting because they interviewed Philip Napoli of Duke University, and he said he isn't surprised Americans struggle with news literacy given the, quote, gatekeeping by media companies. And we've talked about gatekeepers here. Anybody who's been around long enough has heard that term, a gatekeeper. And it's just somebody in the media or in education or in politics, whatever position they may have, where they literally, it's like you're blocking the gate. You're turning people into a misdirection or disinformation, so you can keep them from really accessing all the available facts. Philip Napoli of Duke University says, quote, the number of gatekeepers has increased, and with media fragmentation, these gatekeepers operate with a range of motives. His research focuses on media policy and social media. He says, quote, also, these new gatekeepers, including social media sites, do so little to parse out the good information from the bad. I don't know that it's the job of the social media companies. We really don't want them to be involved in it. That's kind of part of the problem, but I get where he's going. He says that people come across news links while on social media, and those links become information sources whether people trust them or not. You may be perusing social media for a host of reasons, and that's where you get exposed to news, and it may be incidental exposure. Republicans told the pollsters that they are more likely to trust news updates from Donald Trump, though most Americans said they don't trust information that comes from the president. So 61% of people polled in general don't trust information coming from the president, and then people who tend to be Republicans say they are more likely to trust updates from him. Now, again, the problem is that sometimes Trump is saying things and calling out real shit that the media bias is doing or that the system's up to, but a lot of times he does lie. He does just make up shit. So, I mean, trusting one person or one institution or one outlet is not a good idea. And this is why, ultimately, the problem we have in this world that we're trying to fix, or I'm trying to fix, is the worship and blind standing behind of authority. You need to think for yourself as much as possible. Napoli said devotion to a candidate or president has come to define partisanship and politics in a way it hasn't before. It's the way partisanship has evolved in our country, which now takes the form of almost blind devotion. There you go, blind devotion and worship of an authority. How much of it means antagonism towards the other party or just a degree of blind loyalty on both sides, I don't think it used to mean. So nearly half of Americans, 45%, say they believe members of Congress have tremendous influence on the news coming from the federal government, while only 30% of the same said the same of federal employees. The survey found that 72% of Democrats are more likely to trust news that features interviews with scientists. And this is funny to me because, if I can generalize for a moment, those who tend to be on the left are often supporters of vaccinations. They're supporters of climate change theory, man-made climate change theory. They trust that the FDA and the FCC and the scientists are doing their job. And if fluoride was bad, they would have told us. If vaccines were bad, we would know it by now because scientists. And 5G, the same thing. So it doesn't surprise me that they see that those who tend to be Democrats are more likely to trust interviews when it has scientists in it, which really doesn't mean shit at the end of the day. And only 40% of Republicans said the same. And about 6 in 10 Americans, regardless of political beliefs, so 6 out of 10, said they are very likely to consider news reports to be factual if they're based on data. And again, the problem with that is data can be easily manipulated and made to be made to look one way, or whether or not it's actually true. You have to take the time to go, even like a study like this, like looking into the study and saying, well, how many people do they poll? What type of people do they ask? Is this accurate? Things like that. But most people just see, oh, look, this scientific study or this study said that X amount of data backs up my theory or my already confirmed bias. So there I go. I've got everything I need to know. We need to be able to challenge that. Challenge your presuppositions and your own biases and your beliefs that you hold already if we're ever going to get past this state of just blind worship. And about 6 in 10 Americans said they're likely to trust reports if they are based on data. The same percentage said they go directly to government websites for information. Again, back to the whole the CDC, the FCC, the FDA. I mean, how many other corrupt government agencies are there? All of them on the federal level. And people, I mean, you ever been in a debate with somebody and you're talking about, like, I don't know, fluoride or the dangers of some of the problems with vaccines that some people have faced, or 5G, or just any of the topics that I've covered, right? And that you guys are familiar with. And somebody busts out the CDC.gov or the FDA.gov or FCC.gov, and it's like, that's your source? I mean, that's just, it's almost as bad. It's worse, but it's in the same kind of arena as posting Snopes as a source. So yeah, here you go. There's some of the information. You can look at it. Now, this one is interesting as well, this last little point. Local TV news programs are the primary source of information for 52% of Americans. So 52% of people are still getting their news locally, which also tells you why the news must be controlled from national level down to the local. And I dealt with that during my recent attempt for mayor of Houston. I saw how corrupt the media is on the local level. So 52% of Americans getting their information from local news. 50% get their news from national TV outlets, and 40% of cable news programs. Information about the federal government hosted on social media sites and apps makes up the primary news source for 54% of people, though a majority said they have little confidence in the accuracy of the information. So that's pretty good. People have little confidence in the accuracy of information from the FCC, or from the federal government. So, like I said, this is... It's really dangerous. I mean, we're in that. Think about what Bilderberg in the last couple of years has talked about, and more people now that we're in the age of Trump have talked about the post-truth world. We're in a post-truth world, right? And post-truth mean essentially that we can't tell what is true. We can't define fact from fiction. And I've done videos on our channel before talking about audio and video fakery, and how this is only going to get worse. We have, deep fakes and things of this sort. So it's going to be hard to tell what is real, what's going on around you, if the person the video you're watching was actually said by that person. So we have that level of sort of difficulty discerning fact from fiction. But there's also just the simple fact that people don't trust the media, and they don't know where to look, and they don't really know how to think. And because of the education system also being controlled by this same statist corporatist system, they're dumbing people down, and people don't know how to think critically. And this has been the goal in the design for a very long time. Some of you may be familiar with this quote, this often quoted from, what's his name? CIA Director William Casey, where he apparently said the following: we'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. Now, I'll show you that on Quora.com right here. People ask, like, is this true? Is this a real statement? And Barbara Honegger, who was involved with the CIA, you can look her up. Was in the meeting. She worked for the Reagan administration. She commented here and saying, look, I am the source for this quote, which was indeed said by CIA Director William Casey at an early February 1980 meeting with then newly elected President Ronald Reagan. So it's often quoted and thrown around, but here she is for sure saying, like, look, I was in that meeting. It's definitely a quote, and basically saying that was the goal of the CIA, is to make sure that their program would be completed when we did not know fact from fiction, and when everything the American public believed was in fact false. And we're getting pretty close to that. And this, if you need a brush up, this little article here from Global Research talks about what is often known as Operation Mockingbird, which we don't know if that's the real name, but basically the idea that, and the fact that the CIA and the NSA and the FBI have been gathering information on people, they've been spying on people, but they've also been infiltrating the media since at least the 50s and the 60s, and of course up to this day. We know that there are CIA assets posing as journalists and people with close ties to the government who then go in to be analysts and things of that sort. So the CIA Director William Casey in the early 80s said that they had a disinformation program to make the public believe everything they believe would be false. And in the post-truth world, which, remember, came about in the age of Donald Trump started calling everything fake news, which was real. There is really fake news. But also Hillary Clinton started using the fake news meme and saying, there's so much fake news spreading, and why did she do that? You have to remember, it started because of that thing that we barely talk about, Pizzagate, because Pizzagate was spreading everywhere and people were concerned that the authorities were realizing people were starting to question the pedophilia in our world, and so they had to label everybody in the independent media, everybody who's questioning things, as fake news. So they pretend like the real fake news is the people, the independent media, when the fake news is actually coming from the government themselves and from the media companies that have been in bed with the intelligence agencies for at least going on 50, 60 years. Did I make a point here? Do you guys get what I'm saying? This poll is showing that Americans are struggling to tell real news from fake. The CIA said that their program would be complete when everything Americans believe is fake. People don't know if they can trust videos and audio because of video and audio fakery technology. We don't even know if Epstein killed himself. People don't know what to think, what is what anymore, and this is why it's so hard to have a conversation, especially with some of you guys on social media, on YouTube, because you mistrust everything, which is a good thing, but you mistrust everything so much to the point that even when there is some facts going around, you're likely to reject it if it doesn't fit with your narrative. And look, yes, we know that there is corruption, we know there's pedophilia, but sometimes the stories we find and the rabbit holes we dig down end up with nothing. There's nothing at the bottom of that rabbit hole, and we just, we were looking for something, but it's not there. But some of you aren't willing to accept that. You're like, no, there's something here. I'm just being lied to, or it's fake, or that person's a shill, and this and that. And so we eat each other alive because there's no trust, there's no belief, and that is what the post-truth world was about. And guess what, my friends? They have succeeded. We live in the post-truth world. We are at the end of 2019, we're about to enter the 2020s when we go into the age of the smart grid, the 5G, the Internet of Things. This Agenda 2030 is coming, and people can't tell what's real anymore. So I expect this will only get worse, and it'll be used to stoke and create more and more division. And anybody who questions what the people in power and the media say is fact, obviously you'll be deleted from the internet, and sooner or later you'll be deleted from society once the social credit system comes into play. And this is the happy message I have to share with you today. We might be fucked. This is why we need critical thinking. This is why each and every one of you need to dig deep, question your own biases. Don't share articles just because it confirms what you believe. Think on a deeper level, my friends. Question yourself. And if you enjoyed this report and you enjoy my other reports, I want to ask you guys to invest in the Conscious Resistance Network, the future of the Conscious Resistance Network, as we go into 2020 and we battle all the bullshit I just talked about. I'm going to continue going into my 10th year fighting these things and exposing people to the lies. I'm going to continue making documentaries and writing books and producing videos. But because of this war on the real news and this promotion of fake news, there are no more jobs for people like me. I need you to hire me. I need you to invest in me. So please consider donating $5, $7, $10, whatever you can, to our crowdfunding campaign this month. You only have 9 days left, and I appreciate every single one of you who have been with me today. Thank you for listening. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. And yes, naysayers, you are free, but you got to get up. You got to start fighting, and you got to think for yourself. That is the way you will be free. Peace.